Welcome to Off Watch, a podcast by the Ocean Race. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to Bianca Cook, a young Kiwi sailor who did the last edition of the race on board Turn the Tide on Plastic and is now lining up to come back for her second, but this time as skipper of a New Zealand flagged entry. Now, helping her out on that steep learning curve is Tony Rae. And if you're anybody that knows anything about sailing, you'll know that Tony Rae is an incredible tutor to have. He's done multiple editions of the Ocean Race. He's won it twice. He's also been a big feature of the America's Cup. And as you can imagine, he's got some incredible stories to tell. Since the first Whitbread in 1973, there have been 13 editions of the race. New Zealander Tony Rae has competed in 6 of them, winning it twice. And he's also lining up another New Zealand entry that would bridge a 10-year gap between Kiwi flagged boats. Now, that's surprising when you consider that so many of the names in the Hall of Fame have been Kiwi sailors, not least Tony Rae himself. Outside of offshore sailing, he's also a big name in the America's Cup, campaigning 7 times, all for New Zealand, and winning it twice. A big sailor with a lot more still to do in the sport. Tony, thank you very much for joining me today. It's always fascinating to talk to somebody who's been involved in the race for as long as you have and hear about how much has changed and what ultimately is still the same at its core. And I guess that's where I want to start, because when you first did the race back on Lion New Zealand, 85, you're 23 years of age on this maxi with 18 crew. You must have had a perspective there. 21. Wow. Okay. There you go. You had a perspective there that was pretty unique. Now with this new project that you're involved with, New Zealand Ocean Racing, you're lining up to give another young generation a chance to prove themselves. Why? Why should somebody in their early 20s go and do this race? Because let's be honest, a lot of it isn't that much fun.
Yep, it's you've hit the nail on the head there. But the other thing is, though, Niall, is a lot of it is a lot of fun, and there is some. I don't think there's anyone that's done the race since 1973 that will remember or a lot of like the bits that they hated or whatever, but the bits I think that with around the world race, that the sailing that you get out of it, the people that you're with, the people that you sail with, the friends that you make, always outweigh the bad weather, the bad breakages, the whatever it is that have made you think in the middle of the night, this is the last place I want to be, and I never want to do this again. And next minute you're doing it again. And I think it always comes back to people. The sailing's fantastic, obviously, because you just get day after day after day of amazing sailing and so many different conditions and so many different countries and oceans that. But a lot of the time, it just comes down to the people that you're sailing with and enjoying the time and racing. I mean, obviously, the whole time you're not just sailing along, having a good time. You're actually racing. So you always, doesn't matter what boat you're on, you always just get up and try and make the thing go faster. So, but you've got the people around you. It's the team around you that make that part of it enjoyable and push each other. So for me, it's always been is what I've enjoyed the most about the round the world race is the people.
And you've sailed with some key players, some key people. I mean, Sir Peter Blake, obviously from the new generation as well. I mean, I was looking at the list. I mean, Chris Nicholson, one of the sort of more sort of modern people, but also there's some absolutely Grant Dalton, Canute Frostad, that were skippers of boats that you were sailing with, not least some of the sailors. And I want to hear about, from your opinion anyway, what makes some of those people special. But before I do that, I want to know about what it's like to have experienced those laps around the planet in both a maxi and a Whitbread 60 or, the VO 65s. Is it fundamentally different going into, say, like the Southern Ocean on a boat that is colossal in nature and going down there on a 60-footer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the classic situation for me was when you mentioned Chris Nicholson is jumping on camper, and the race I'd done before that was on a maxi ketch on New Zealand Endeavour. So the Volvo 70 is a very very different boat to an 83-foot maxi ketch. Very powerful, and very powerful, very fast. They'll always be an amazing boat. And that was an eye opener to leap straight on a boat like that, and pretty much send it in conditions, because you're just sailing such different angles. And it's not that you weren't pushing the maxis at all. It was just the same, but just the angles that you sail, and it was all about apparent wind angles downwind. And so when you got breeze, it was they're very wet, very boats, so you had to make sure everything was strapped on, you're strapped on, and sailing with, I guess for me, sailing with someone like Nico was, his confidence level is just way out there, and so that leapt me into that zone pretty quickly, and feeling confident and feeling safe with the boat, and being able to push the boat as hard as he could, with Stu Bannatyne, people like that can drive these boats, which has always amazed me, how fast they can actually steer them for the length of time. And so for me, going from those two, I guess you call them not extreme, but they are kind of they are very very different, because with the maxi ketch, you've got 23 sails down below that, you change one spinnaker and then you change the gennaker at the back, and then you change back again, and then the sail changes were endless. And as far as with say camper and the Volvo 70, it's all about getting that right combination and strapping everything in when you've got breeze downwind, and really pushing the thing hard, which I think all the boats did. But because of that, the amount of the speed that you're going, the amount of water around, there's always room for error. But no, they're fantastic boats, and I think this is the Volvo 65 is that similar generation, and so they are different boats to sail. And so people that get on the Volvo boats that have come from doing a lot of sailing on a lot of other boats, whether it be big boats, TP52s, super yachts, dinghies, whatever, that are actually extremely good sailors, always find these boats different, because with the canting keel, the way they load up, the way that you sail, the angles that you sail them, so they aren't a conventional boat. And so there's just a lot to learn, and I think that's what's quite exciting about the boat, is that there always is other things to learn. These are one design boats, the 65s, but there's always something else to learn about how to make them go faster. So I think that's going to be that'll be an exciting part of the next race, I think.
And of course, being able to learn, that's a key thing for any sort of new crew member that's kind of coming on, realizing that finding those things to learn and finding, shall we say, weaknesses is actually an attribute. And Bianca Cook was talking about that really interestingly in terms of what she's looking for her team for the next edition. But obviously she's got some stuff to learn as well in terms of becoming a skipper. You mentioned Chris Nicholson, camper, Team Vestas Wind as well, as skipper. What have you seen from skippers that you found yourself with Bianca Cook saying, here's a good lesson for you, here's a nice way of doing it, here's a good way of managing maybe personalities, managing a tricky situation, or just generally, being a leader of a sailing team performing well?
Yeah, I think that's a big one, is just being that leader. And I think people from outside of the I guess, in some ways from outside of the sailing world, sort of hear the word skipper and think, oh, well, that's the guy, that's the person that drives the boat all the time, and stands behind the wheel, and that's it. But I think the skipper, it is the leader of the team. You're heading the team on the water, but I think you're also very happy to put yourself in the different situations, or the skipper is happy to put themselves in different situations and show that leadership to, and also, show the leadership of what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, whether you're racing or whether you're just working on the campaign, in an office or whatever. It's just driving that team in the right direction, but it's also using the people around you to actually go forward with the whole project, and also go forward with, when you're sailing the boat, is using the right people in the right places on the boat. And so putting the people in the right positions on the boat, and giving them that opportunity, and giving them the chance to actually show what they can do, is a big part of that skipper role, and having the confidence, showing the confidence to actually do that. Nico's obviously fantastic at that, and hence the reason that I said if he did it again, I'd go, and he did. And so that that's the reason I sort of ended up on Vestas. He's a fantastic guy to sail with, and just he does show that confidence. And those other people you mentioned, with Blakey and Daltz and people like that, are do show that same confidence, but also give other people pass on that ownership of areas that to take on, and so you feel like you're actually you're a big part of the team, and I think that's a pretty important part of a skipper.
Really interesting that you say that the general public, and I think a lot of the sailing fans as well, don't fully understand exactly what it is that a skipper does, because of course it's a name on the top of the crew list, but actually how that interaction works. Help us out. Can you, with all of the sailing that you've done in terms of the ocean race and all some of the big names that you've sailed with, can you think of any time that it was because of somebody, maybe the skipper, maybe watch leader or whatever, that you think they said something, they did something small, but it pulled me out of a hole? It got me back to where I needed to be. Have you ever been lifted like that when you needed it?
I think there's probably a bunch of times, but I think the biggest one is just leading by example a little bit. Like, for instance, I know you mentioned, and I'm sort of thinking of situations more recent, I guess, but when talking about Nico, he's one of those ones that just leads by example as far as how he operates himself on the boat, being whether he's a skipper or not, how he pushes himself to that sort of level on the boat, actually doing stuff, actually moving the stack down below. Whatever it takes, he's sort of in there, boots and all. And that's just that leading by example. You're not just, oh, well, I'm the skipper, so I'll just get everyone else to do all the jobs that aren't that much fun, whether it be mopping out the bilge or fixing something, or just doing sail changes and that sort of thing. He's not always the guy that just grabs the wheel and takes control that way. So I think that leading by example and getting in there and working as well, and the other ones we mentioned are the same. Those show those same values, and I think that's what you see around you, and so that it makes it very easy to sort of keep yourself pushing yourself when things aren't all that much fun, and you can see the skipper pushing themselves as well. That's what keeps you going.
And I'm assuming as well that, well, not just the skipper, but all of you, that ability to react to something pretty unexpected. You mentioned Chris Nicholson, and if he watches this, he'll be disappointed with me if I don't find another reason to mention the reef. And I will, but I'll do that in a minute. But I mean, there are so many things that you look at any edition of the race, how crews have had to think on their feet and react to things that are a little bit unusual. I mean, one of the ones that stood out for me, and maybe in your experience is just a sort of blip, but, Innovation Caverna, when you guys you had to get mast repair equipment delivered to you via helicopter when you were on an anchor. That team had to do some stuff like that. I mean, again, I imagine that's a little bit of a skill that a lot of sailors think it's going to be, well, it'll happen like it does in the book. If you do X, you do Y. Whereas actually, you must have experienced some stuff that are just, wow, how have we found ourselves in this situation?
Yeah, well, I was wondering if you were going to bring up the reef thing, but that's, going back to Nico again, that's probably, I can't imagine getting yourself in a more horrendous situation for any skipper ever, a more horrendous situation than that potentially was, but how he dealt with that at the time, probably, I think, okay, it's always a team effort, but the way he dealt with that could have, it would have saved. It just would have been I just can't. It's hard to sort of describe, but it could have so easily been a major catastrophe with losing people.
Yeah.
And I think his quick reactions and how we dealt with the situation prevented that, and we're all still around today to talk about it and have a drink together, which is exceptional. And I think that's that's a very that's a kind of a special person to deal with that situation, and not just deal with it at the time, but all the goings on afterwards to get it sorted out. So that's when the skipper role, from just driving a boat to sailing along, having a great time with your team, to dealing with a situation like that's on the edge of sort of life and death and losing people potentially is a huge difference.
I did speak to Chris Nicholson for the Offwatch series, and he gave a really good interview, and we touched on many things, but of course we did also touch on the reef. And as you can imagine, he was pretty humble when I was trying to, I think quite rightly, kind of put some praise in his lap for how well it did turn out. So it's good to hear from somebody on board that my understanding of it is not wrong. He handled that one well. For those people that weren't there, like I say, we've heard from Chris's point of view. Where were you? How dramatic was that moment, going from everything's fine to we're in serious trouble?
Yeah, well, it's that sort of date's coming around again, Niall. Actually, it's the 29th of November, so we're in the same month, and
that's interesting, because I didn't mean where were you in terms of date and time and location. I meant where were you on the boat, but it's just interesting that, yeah, of course, it would be a day you remember, and I totally understand that.
Oh, absolutely. We always have a drink on that day, whoever's around. So, but yes, I was at the time I was trimming the main. Nikolai was driving, and I actually, it was interesting. We'd come through, which you've heard the story lots of times before, but we'd come through this tropical storm. So it had just been a lot of rain and really tricky conditions. Really, the darkest probably conditions you could ever sail in. But when you talk about enjoying that type of sailing, it wasn't that part of it. There was bits of it that wasn't, not a lot of fun. And anyway, not long after that, we're reaching along doing 21, 20, 24 sort of with a fractional and a reef, and I was, honestly, I was thinking at the time, wow, I'm really enjoying this race. Okay, we've only 10 days out of Cape Town, but this is fantastic. We're having some great sailing here, and it was, dark and everything, but soaking wet and cold. But I was just thinking to myself, man, I'm really enjoying this this race now, and I sort of felt like I was sort of really getting into it. And then all hell breaks loose. I mean, just out of nowhere, and that changed. It obviously changed the race for us, but it also changed the way that had to deal with that situation. Had to deal with, what do we do now? We've hit something. Okay, how do we look after each other? I think that was probably the biggest thing out of okay, there's all the safety situations you go through and all the procedures, but when it all happens kind of like in reverse, with the boat getting smashed onto the reef backwards after we spun around, all those sort of, I guess, safety sort of things procedures and what you're going to do, it all sort of goes out the door a little bit. You've got to start thinking of, well, I can't do that now because we're backwards, and the gear that we've got down below is, getting smashed up, and so there's different situations that sort of are racing through your head. But at the same time, I think what everyone did well on the boat was look after each other, and looked out for each other for whatever it might be. Hey, mate, hang on, here comes a wave. So we're all trying to, one of the things, obviously me being a medic, one of the big things for me was just, shit, we've got to, if someone gets injured here, well, we've already hit the reef. Okay, everyone's in one piece. But from now on, if someone has a major injury because they've fallen over, because someone else has tried to do something and knocked them over, now we've got someone with a broken leg or a fractured skull, whatever, that situation is going to be an absolute major to deal with. You're not going to say, okay, keep the boat still while we fix this guy up. So that's what was continuously racing through my head the whole time until we actually got off the boat. And so I think the way that the team looked after each other pretty much saved anyone having any major injuries. And, I think that leadership, when you go back to that leadership of, okay, let's talk about the situations, what we've got, what we're doing now. This is how we're going to do it. But also taking in a lot of sort of ideas and other people's thoughts on how we deal with it on the crew, and not just, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're all going to jump off the boat now. We actually talked the situations through. So everyone had a really good idea in their mind as to how they were actually going to deal with it themselves, and what areas that they looked after, so that everyone knew what each other was going to do before we got off the boat, before we got into our survival suits, all that sort of thing, and the different steps. So that as a team was freaking unbelievable. And so, luckily it all worked, and my medical kits left the yacht and out the bottom of the boat and floated off somewhere. So, for me not to, I had one day bag or 1 day kit. And so for me, knowing that the 2 other medical kits, so no fluid, no IV, no suturing gear, nothing like that, had floated off to somewhere, was pretty horrendous in the back of my mind. That was just, so that I struggled with that for a while, knowing that if now that someone had we had a issue, I've got very, very limited gear to deal with it, whatever happened, So for me, that was pretty hard to sort of deal with until we got to the point where we were sort of safely in a life raft and kind of getting picked up, and now we're on an island, So, that just knowing that was going to be all sorted, and we could get through that, but without me, I did stress to everyone, obviously, that I didn't have that gear anymore. Was a big deal was a big deal, and something that I had really, really, it really concerned me for for the whole time we were on the boat, really.
Because you mentioned it before, you've been medic on another boat as well. You must have an experience of a responsibility, like you say, in terms of, you see people get injured, you have to look after them. It does kind of come down to you. That must be quite a burden on your shoulders at times. How close do you get to sort of going, I don't want that burden anymore. I don't want to do this as a medic. I want to stand back now.
No, but yeah, I actually quite like it. I really like I like the medical. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't have my brain isn't big enough to have been a doctor. I wish it was. But I like I guess I like that army type medical, that medical paramedic type job. And you're right. There's probably not a time I've jumped in my bunk and haven't been thinking about different situations that might happen. And a lot of the times, I guess, and all that sort of sailing that I've done, having that role, and it sort of started from Steinlager. And when I took that on, there's probably not a time I've been on the boat or jumped in a bunk or seen different things happen and think, okay, how will I deal with that if that did happen, or if that that guy nearly lost his finger. So if he did lose his finger, how would I deal with that? Or so. I've always just rolled through different situations because, as you know, on a boat, you don't have the equipment that you have if you're on the side of the road and you jump in an ambulance and go to a hospital. So even in the training and when we've done the training with different people, you're always trying to think back to how would I deal with this if I was on the boat. And when you're on the ambulance doing some practical work or at the hospital or whatever, is you're constantly asking doctors or paramedics or whatever, okay, how would you deal with this if you don't have oxygen, if you don't have that drug, if you don't have that equipment, how would you deal with it? And so then they go, oh, well, if I didn't have this, I'd do it this way. So for me, it was all about, and that everyone's got the same equipment on each boat. And the big one is being able to relay that if you have a situation, is being able to assess it and then relay that situation to a specialist over the radio, or like we're doing these days, you can do a video link or whatever and actually discuss the issue and then try and deal with it. And that's not always easy, but a lot of the times it is trying to deal with things that before they get worse, you're able to spot something or see something or someone's not feeling well, or they've got an infection on their leg that's tiny, but now it's huge because they haven't seen it. It's been under their wet weather gear or whatever. And now, instead of just dealing with it on a small way with some antibiotic ointment, now they're on antibiotics, and prevention is a big part of it as well. Obviously, accidents are accidents, but a lot of the other things are prevention. And I get they're probably the hardest things to deal with situations you can't see. So someone that's just not feeling well, doesn't look well, got a pain in their stomach, got a pain in their chest, got a pain in the back, whatever. You can't, at a hospital they go and you have a scan and X-rays or whatever. That doesn't happen out there. So you've got to try and figure out what's going on, whether you're talking to a doctor or not. And those are probably the scary ones, because if you're 2 days out, okay, from port, that's different. If you're 3 weeks out, how's the situation going to change for the race if we had to get from or stop or get the person off or whatever. There's a million sort of situations going around in your head that you're trying to deal with. So that part of it, it's great, and you need someone else to sort of bump ideas off as well. So I think the race, they do a great job of having more than one medic, qualified medic on the boat. So but yeah, it's an interesting role. But like I said, everyone has their areas that they're responsible for, and that's what makes the team, and that's what makes it fun and exciting to be part of.
Do you still find strong, mentally tough, hard as nails sailors who are still scared of a needle?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's plenty out there that don't let you know. I mean, Daltz is a classic. He'd run across a busy street naked if he had to get away from someone with a needle. And I've witnessed that. He just doesn't like that at all. But there's lots of people like that. But I think when it comes to that time, if you need an injection of some sort, you're obviously probably not in great shape.
Yeah,
unless it's a tetanus or something. But you're probably not in great shape. So getting a needle for pain relief or whatever is probably the least of your problems.
You said that probably the biggest problem that you have as a medic are the things that you can't see, and I can completely empathise with that. The thing that came to my mind when you said that was the possibility of a crew member having an injury and not wanting to announce it. And what I'm driving at here is leg 2 in the 14-15 edition with Team Vestas Wind, when none of us knew, who were following the race, none of us knew that you'd smashed up your ribs before the start of that leg, and then there you are on board the boat a couple of days out, and you sort of come clean and you go, well, we're out here now, and this is you've got a. I mean, it's a nasty smash from a pedestal handle.
On camper.
Was it camper? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Well, no. Hang on. No, because camper, you did break your. See, this is it. We can list your injuries now. Camper, you did break a couple of ribs, but I'm sure I've got this right. It was Team Vestas Wind when you did a nasty smash to your ribs, and you didn't announce to anyone. And when you were on the boat, and I think you were asked by, I think it was the onboard reporter, why didn't you want to say anything about this? Maybe you told the crew, I don't know, and that's what I'd like to know. But I think you said, I didn't want my mother to worry. Was it a case of, I'm feeling all right, I'm just going to keep this to myself, I don't want the team to know because I don't want to get benched? Or was it just a case of, I'm going to keep this out of the press, it's just easier if I worry about the sailing?
Yeah, you're right about my mother. I'd keep those things quiet. You don't want her worrying, but those sorts of things. I mean, you have to, you have to analyze it yourself and feel confident that you can still operate properly. And that situation, I got checked out and with our physio, excuse me, and getting a scan and okay, there was cracked ribs, and the advice I got from the doctor was that if I carried on and displaced them, that if I knocked them again, they could easily, displace and actually repair and out of line.
And you say that that's quite a casual sentence, but that's a serious problem if that were to happen.
Yeah, well, it kind of did, but what the message that I was getting from the doctor, and I was with the physio, was, you carrying on sailing is probably not the ideal situation, but that's probably not the message that you want me to tell you, but I'm just telling you anyway. I know you're probably not going to listen to me, but I'm just going to tell you anyway. This is the doctor, and the physio, Paul Wilson, said, "Yeah, no, that's not really the answer he was after. He probably is going to go." And I just had to, with ribs, you've got to let them, you obviously got to let them repair. You can't do a lot, but just kind of try and look after yourself. Now I knew that if I bumped them again, they would set kind of out of line. And I did bump them again without realising it. And they, one of them has actually set. Oh, I've got a little bump. I've got a little bump there now, but from one side different to the other. But I had to deal with it. It was painful, but I knew that I could get through it.
But I just want to interrupt you there for 1 second, because I'm fascinated about this from a medic point of view, and I feel bad if I let you continue without asking one simple question at this point. If you're the medic on that boat and somebody else had done that to their ribs and the risks were as you describe, and they said, "I'm good, don't worry about it, I'll be fine." If it wasn't you, if the situation was reversed, would you have said, "I understand your passion, jump aboard," or would you have gone, "That's a risk too far"?
I think you leave it up to other people at that stage. Obviously a doctor and the someone outside of the thing. It's different when you're actually on the boat.
Very diplomatic.
But, the people, that's not really for the medic to decide that, is in a way. Probably it's the doctor and the skipper. And that situation, I just probably spoke really. I just put it to Nico in the right way, and he listened to me. If that makes sense. I know what Nico's thinking now if he was watching, but I think those sorts of situations. I mean, another one like that is, with Mike Pimenta, when he smashed his face on camper and got washed back against the cabin top and smashed his opened his lip up and knocked his teeth out, and that was pretty horrendous for him, and obviously a lot of pain, and it didn't look good, and half his lips open, and had to suture his lip up and try and make him look half decent again, because he was a good looking guy before that. And so going through that situation and dealing with, okay, we've got to slow the boat down and try and make it as smooth enough so I can get some sutures in here. Nico gave me 15 minutes, but the actual, and that all looked horrendous, and his teeth are missing, and he had to inject into his gums and to numb the pain and that sort of thing. But for me, that was not really the issue that worried me the most. It was actually that he'd whacked his head. Mm. So I was more concerned about his ongoing issues with his possible concussion or whatever, and how he was going to react over the next 24 hours, sort of thing, and forgetting about how he looked, but just internally in his head, has he had a head injury, and trying to monitor that. And so that was more of my concern than how he looked. So it's definitely situations like that you're always that spring up on you when you're not at least ready for it, really.
It's really interesting to hear about all those kind of things, and imagine how different they would be now to how they would be done when the race started. And those little, bits of technology, the sort of, the medical staplers and everything else that you guys have got now, and not least some of the, the safety equipment as well. You were talking about the, being able to link with the other boats, discuss with each other and everything else. Not just in the medical, but I remember when you guys did hit the reef, as an example, Alva Medica was there alongside. I think they were able to sort of count. I might have this wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Will Oxley, when he was at the navigation table, was able to see your personal AIS beacons, there and all the rest of it. Is there those points where you get off from the legs and, as navigators, you all come together, as skippers, you all come together, pat each other on the back, as medics, you all kind of come together, and, there's those stories that only another medic maybe would appreciate as well as you need them to.
Yeah, there's, the medics, as with all the races, have always had, at each leg, each stopover, had a get together and discuss different issues that they've had, and you're always trying to learn from each other, and talk about, well, this is the equipment. These days, everyone's with the one design thing. Everyone's got the same equipment. You can take extra stuff if you want, but if there's some little item or a type of bandage or a plaster that works better, or some different medication that's easier to use or whatever, most of the time everyone's discussing that within all the teams, to make it better, to make it easier for everyone to use, because that part of the race, everyone looks after each other, really. It doesn't matter what boat you're on, and I think that's a pretty cool part of the round the world race, and always has been, is that part of it. You're not going to talk about, oh, this is how we trim the sail, this is the shape that we've of the sail we've got, and you should get one of the. But when it comes to people and the medic and looking after each other, that's always information that's shared very very freely.
Yeah, interesting to have a part of the race that isn't hampered by a competitive element. Of course, this is not about making boats go fast. You're just looking after your fellow competitors. But you are a competitive person, and this is sort of what I want to touch on next. Is it's interesting that you seem to be, more than most, but maybe less than others, really proud of representing your country and being able to do that. You've been a member of Team New Zealand for so long. You've been campaigning right at the very top. How do you get an opportunity? If I was to walk around the dock and I was to see, go into the museum and see Black Magic hanging from the ceiling, or Steinlager 2 and all those sorts of things, I still get a bit of a thrill about it, but just as a sailing fan. Do you get to enjoy the fact that you have sailed with some enormous names internationally, as well as in New Zealand sailing, and competed at some of the most amazing arenas?
Oh, for sure. It's, it pretty much comes back to what we touched on right at the beginning, is people. Having, sailed with so many amazing people, not just skippers, but just guys, girls that you've just sailed with off and on, with and against. I think that's probably the cool thing is you're not always sailing on the same boat. Everyone that you've sailed with can't always be on the same boat. So, but being able to sail with and against them over the years, and then sort of switching backwards and forwards to around the world, to America's Cup, whatever. But these similar people sort of mesh in, and there's lots of people that don't go around the world and do the America's Cup. That's just not what they like doing. But there's always that crossover of a whole lot of people, special people that you've sailed with, that are great friends that we still compete against to this day. I mean, not so much this year because there hasn't been a hell of a lot of sailing going on, but in normal situations, in the TP52 fleet or whatever, you're sailing against all sorts of people that you've sailed with over the years and way back in the round the world races or the America's Cup or whatever. So I think, having that sort of, you've got a special, when you've sailed around the world with someone, you've got a pretty special bond as far as a friendship goes. Well, certainly most people do. So, and that is what's that's what's so fantastic about the sport.
Yeah, you have to admit that. Well, maybe you can't see it, but from an outsider looking in, New Zealand seems to have something really special in terms of a national passion for the sport of sailing and for sporting excellence, certainly in that field. Is this a product of people like Sir Peter Blake, just a strong sailor in his own right coming in, or are people like Sir Peter Blake and yourself a product of the enthusiasm from a country as a whole? Can you put your finger on it at all?
I think it's Kiwis love sailing, and I certainly wouldn't put myself in the same realm as Blakey, but people have always looked up to him and wanted to do what he's done, sailing around the world. They look at Dalton, when he had his campaign, and whether it be the America's Cup or the round the world race, and Russell and Chris Dixon and there's just, I think, a wide range of people that have seen do the race and then go, a lot of Kiwis go, I want to do that. I want to do that race, or I want to be on that campaign. And that's what sort of, I think, drives the Kiwis. And for me, I guess now certainly trying to, put this campaign together, is you see that, I sort of see that more now, I guess, because I'm at the other end of the program where people are coming to me or sending me an email saying, hey, I'd love to be involved, as opposed to me sending emails to a skipper or a team or whatever to be involved or in a different situation. So, it's been amazing how many, these young Kiwis that want to really, really want to do this race. And, I really hope that we can, put this thing together and give those, it's all about giving those, that younger generation the opportunity to do what we've done, what I've done in the past at that age, or, in your 20s and 30s, that you can do the round the world race, because, I can guarantee that none of them will that do the race that will finish it and go, well, I wish I hadn't done that. They'll be, either, okay, that was great, but I'm not going to do it again, or they've got the bug and they really want to carry on. But it's fantastic to see so much, so much passion to this younger generation to do the race, but also seeing when they're sending CVs through and stuff like that, and just seeing all the qualifications and the amount of sailing that they've done, but yet they still want to, obviously still want to sort of tick off that round the world race. And it's something that it's different, and it's fantastic to see. But I think that's where you've got to keep I'm hoping that we can keep that, because if the younger generation don't get an opportunity to do this, then it's going to fade away when it comes to offshore sailing. There's going to be a limited amount of options available. So I think by having a New Zealand team, it's giving that it's giving that chance. It's offering that chance to for younger ones. It might not, for a lot of them, it might not work out for this race coming up, for the next edition, because of age, because all these restrictions around it, age and gender or whatever. So it's not something that is just a, sign up and off you go. It's about having the opportunity there so that we can do some offshore sailing in New Zealand, and we can put a squad together, hopefully, that we can show up on the start line in Alicante in 22. And so, I really, really hope that it's going to happen. Obviously, the goalposts are moving around a lot with everything that's going on globally. So, it's not easy, but we'll go have a go and see what happens.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have a long queue of sailors, especially after hearing all your stories about getting your teeth knocked out, busting ribs, crashing onto a deserted island. I mean, as we said at the beginning, who wouldn't want to do this race? Tony, thank you very much. It's really interesting to learn yet more about the race and the characters that make it special. So thank you very much.
Cheers.